Hello, everyone, and welcome to another X's and Dogs podcast. Today, we're talking about the Browns' 23-20 loss against the Buffalo Bills that happened yesterday. Now, normally I film my post game shows the day of the football, the actual game, but today I'm joining you guys from sunny and 75-degree Sarasota, Florida. Last night was just a pretty busy evening for me down here on my vacation, so I didn't have time to sit down and talk to you guys about the game, although I was able to go to a local sports bar down here and watch it, which was pretty fun. A pretty good environment. There were a couple other Browns fans in the sports bar, so that was cool to see, but my overall takeaways from this game are that it was actually more competitive than I thought it was going to be. The Browns fought pretty hard in this one. I thought there was a pretty good chance this team was going to fold in this game and kind of just give up on the season. Playing against the Buffalo Bills team who, if I had to pick a team to win the Super Bowl today, I would probably choose the Bills at this moment. It would be a tough decision, but I just trust Josh Allen more than any other quarterback who's going to make the playoffs at this point, because we know obviously Patrick Mahomes isn't going to be in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson, after going out of that game last night and losing, more than likely not going to be in the playoffs. It'll take almost a miracle at this point for the Ravens to make the playoffs. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if the Steelers beat us next week at home, they win the division, because at that point they will have reached 10 wins, and the Ravens, being at 7-8, can't reach 10 wins. So, if the Steelers are going to be super motivated to beat us next week, because then that head-to-head game against the Ravens doesn't even matter in Week 18 for them. So, anyway, I really expected the Browns to look kind of lifeless in this game and then go out there and get beat by a few touchdowns. But a pleasant surprise was that this team did show some fight. And, in a season where I think it's best for this team to continue to lose games to get a higher draft pick, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, it's always good to see the team fight still and lose a close game rather than lose a blowout, because I think that still builds good habits in these players and some of these young guys who we want to continue to have, as years go on. So that was a positive note of the game. Just seeing the team fight, especially in the second half. They easily could have kind of given up on Kevin and given up on kind of the season at that point, as they were down by a couple scores there, but they held the Bills to only 3 points in the second half, scored a touchdown and a field goal and kept it close there. Had a possession to go down and have a chance to tie the game or win it with a couple minutes left. That Shedeur took those couple sacks on, which we'll talk about in a second. But last week I one of the things I talked about was that there was only a couple things that could happen in the games from here on out that really matter. First off, hopefully the team doesn't win any games to ruin the draft position. So obviously we know that did not occur. The team lost. The second thing, though, was having bad injuries to any of our young players, like the guys we drafted or any of the young guys we rely on and we're going to rely on next year. And of course, the nasty, devastating injury to Quinshon Judkins in yesterday's game, which was just terrible to see. I kind of equate it to the Mike Hall injury of last season, where Mike Hall was playing in that Ravens game, which I think it was the last game of the year, and he had that nasty knee injury and kept him out for more than half the season this year, and there was a whole bunch of question marks in the offseason with Mike Hall, and it turned into him missing the majority of the season, although a lot of us thought he was going to be able to play, almost at the beginning of the season. So I kind of equate this Quinshon Judkins injury to that, where it's like, we're playing in these meaningless football games for us where the team probably doesn't really even want to win. And one of our super bright spot young talented players goes out with a nasty, devastating injury, and it really just it sucks, man. It's brutal for this football team. In a year where we really just can't seem to catch a break, as the Browns themselves, as fans of the team, it just feels like, this team is truly cursed at moments, and this is definitely one of those moments, because you watch this team fight against a Bills team and look competitive, and ultimately they lose the game, and the Titans win their game, so there's a ton of positives to take away from yesterday, where, in looking at the future and the draft pick and things like that. But then you have this Judkins injury where it's just really kind of clouds over the whole situation. So that's just really unfortunate. I'm obviously, hoping Quinshon can have the fastest recovery possible. Hopefully he doesn't have any sort of negative implications from this injury going forward, or anything too serious, and hopefully he's able to get himself athletically back to the point where he was. Specifics of the injury, I think, aren't fully released yet, but they did talk about a dislocated ankle and then a broken tibia, or I believe it actually might have been fibula. So a fib fracture, and then also the dislocated ankle. The fib fracture is not the end of the world. Those can, broken bones can heal pretty well, pretty quickly. But unfortunately, the dislocated ankle could have some ligament issues as well to talk about. Obviously I'm not a doctor, but just based on similar injuries, like Cam Scadaboo had kind of a really similar injury earlier this year, there can definitely be some ligament issues that go on in that ankle. So obviously we're not going to know that probably with the way this Browns organization works for a while. So we're going to have to just kind of let things play out and see where we lie, next season, and hopefully we can get him back to maybe not start the year, but at least, play the majority of the season next year, and hopefully he can find himself back in the position that he was this year, which is looking like a really bright, young, talented player. So devastated for him, devastated for, the football team there, and hopefully we can get back to seeing Quinshon sooner rather than later. So that's all I wanted to say about the Quinshon injury. Super unfortunate. I think we'll have to start to look at some running backs now in the back part of this draft. That was something that in all of our mock drafts, I'm sure nobody thought we would touch the running back position after drafting 2 running backs, but now it really is creeping into kind of the situation where we're going to need to revisit that position now with, I'm not sure we can rely on Sampson and Rocket Sanders to be our running backs next year if we want to be competitive. So, we'll either have to visit that in free agency or the draft, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that, though. So, I do want to shift over and talk about Shedeur Sanders in this game. So, Shedeur, to me, my biggest takeaway from Shedeur this week was that he talked about earlier in the week many times, like he brought it up numerous occasions, that he wasn't content with where his completion percentage was at. He wasn't content with the amount of passes he was completing. So to me, it was super evident in this game that they worked with him all week, and he worked all week to complete more passes, take what was available to him rather than trying to, maybe big play hunt or look down the field all the time. And I think that really, and it's hard to say right now because I haven't had a chance to look at the tape. It's early Monday morning, and being on vacation, I'll try my best to look at the All-22 and just have a better idea of what kind of happened. But, without viewing that just based on the TV perspective, it seemed like he was a little over-reliant, maybe more than a little over-reliant on checkdowns and just taking the short, 5-yard and in passes to like the drag routes, the out route. He was just throwing, behind the line of scrimmage a lot, taking these checkdowns quite frequently in this game. He was 20 of 29, so the completion percentage was obviously way better than previous weeks. But he really did not push the ball down the field at all. Which, if we would have taken the positives out of Shedeur's game over the first 4 weeks that he played, I think everyone would say one of the positives is he's willing to throw the ball down the field, and he has a very nice deep ball. He's able to complete the ball on, he was being very consistent with his 25-plus yard pass plays. Like, he was having those every game. I think that was a positive that all of us could agree that he was showing. And I think he kind of erased that aspect of his game by just being super focused on completing passes. And I'm not going to say it didn't fully work. The offense was semi-productive, I would say. We scored 20 points, which is probably going to end up being one of our highest scoring games in the season. But a part of that also is the run game was pretty effective in this one, and also Shedeur was able to do some good things with his legs, get out of the pocket, pick up some third downs by running the football himself. But I think I would be shocked if he didn't miss a few throws down the field in this one. The Bills' defense is not fantastic by any means, and I would be just really surprised if they were completely locking all the wide receivers down, and Shedeur, just truly was not able to throw the ball down the field at all. But we'll see. I'll kind of have maybe another podcast this week, or definitely on Twitter. I'll be talking more about kind of the all 22 and discussing the takeaways from that. But definitely from the TV view and kind of just watching the football game, it seemed Shedeur was over-reliant on just trying to make his completion percentage a little higher, is what it seemed to me. And, I'm not going to say he played a bad game. I think this was like a C- game. The interceptions weren't, you can't blame that first interception solely on him. But he threw the ball really hard to a running back, coming out of his break there, where it was also a little bit behind him. So, whenever you do make that throwing error, or whenever you do leave it off target just a little bit to the running backs, you're always going to have that opportunity of that exact thing happening. So, especially whenever you're throwing to a running back, you have to make sure you're putting extra touch on the ball, putting it right where it needs to be, or else, like I said, you're going to have a chance of bad things happening. And so I think Shedeur definitely does have to take the blame for that one, and I'm sure he would admit that as well. The second interception, also not a great play. It wasn't a great play design. He never really had a fantastic opportunity on that play to make anything great happen. But he was faced with two unblocked pass rushers, and it really is his job to make sure that ball gets past them, whatever it takes. A pump fake, a little shimmy, to get around the defender, however you have to do it. That is his responsibility in that moment. And he wasn't able to do that. The ball, obviously, he threw it, got batted straight up, and bad things happen in that situation as well. So I think both of those Shedeur does take a lot of the blame for them, and a lot of people are going to argue, hey, like these were two of some more deflected interceptions, and Shedeur's had a ton of those this year. But I think both of these you can really make the decision, decision that Shedeur does need to be better in those moments. So, Shedeur, again, it's another one of those games for a rookie quarterback where he did some good things, he did some bad things. I think he's doing this frequent thing where he's focusing and honing in very much on one aspect every game. Like last game, it was throwing to Harold Fannin almost every single time. This week, it was checking the ball down a lot. Against the Titans, not so much. He was pretty balanced in that game, did what he needed to do. But he keeps doing this common thing for rookies where you have just kind of one error where you're not able to learn throughout the game to adjust and fix it throughout the game. So it's whatever that may be for a specific game, it's kind of been something different every week here with him, and that's common. I'm not bashing him. He's a rookie player, and he'll grow, but the whole conversation with Shedeur revolves around if he'll be here as the quarterback next year, and I think unfortunately the reality for Shedeur is he's put in a very tough situation where he has to show that without a doubt he can be the starting quarterback. And I'm just not so sure that he's done that yet. And I'm also not so sure that it's fair to ask a rookie of any kind to do that. Even if you drafted him in the first round, it's not fair to ask that rookie to show you that they are good enough to be without a doubt the starting quarterback. Most rookies can't do that. Regardless of how they're going to turn out later on in their career, it's just not realistic to ask them to do that. But unfortunately, that's the situation that Shedeur was put in. And I think that when push comes to shove and we get to the draft, it's just not going to be enough there for this coaching staff, whether it be a new coaching staff or whether it be Stefanski and Andrew Berry, for them to make the decision that they want to roll with Shedeur as the starting quarterback. And also, building on that, we have the fact that, this Browns team is more than likely going to have a top 2 pick. Like with the Titans win yesterday against the Chiefs, and the Giants and the Raiders playing next week, if the Browns lose out, they are going to have the number 2 pick. Assuming that the Raiders and the Giants don't tie, which with the Browns' luck, I think that's completely on the table. Let's all hope not, though, because that would be absolutely terrible if they do tie. But assuming they don't tie, we will have the second pick if we lose out. And that's assuming that, that Raiders team doesn't beat the Chiefs, who are very quickly now a winnable game on anyone's schedule with the quarterback situation they have going on there. So, I really think the Browns are going to have a good chance to get the number 1 overall pick even. And I think obviously an even better chance to have that second overall pick, and what seems to be clearly a very top-heavy 2 quarterback draft class. Dante Moore played an excellent game this weekend. I cannot wait to see him play against Texas Tech and start to play some even better defenses here in the playoffs. And, if they're able to win some games, I think he might even have an argument to be the first pick in this draft. So both of these quarterbacks coming out of college are very good prospects, and people are, the thing with the Shedeur situation is it's been very evident that people are kind of taking away from Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza just because they don't want to move off of Shedeur. They're a Shedeur fan. They think he can be a good quarterback, which is fair. I understand that. But you also need to take into consideration that these are 2 really good college quarterbacks who can potentially be franchise guys in the NFL. And the Browns are going to have an opportunity to get one of them more than likely. And knowing that, I think they're going to do it. I would be shocked at this point if Shedeur is able to show enough, no fault of his own really, or maybe not no fault, but little fault of his own. He's not going to be able to show enough to prove that he can be the franchise quarterback. And that's not writing off Shedeur's career. I think it might be best for everyone if we do end up trading Shedeur and he goes to another location and ends up being a quarterback for somebody else. That's definitely a possibility, but I think for Cleveland, it's probably just not going to work out for him. But we'll see. There's plenty of time to discuss that in the offseason. We have to make it through the rest of these couple games, and hopefully we can avoid injuries like we saw yesterday to Quinshon. And hopefully we can continue to lose these games, and hopefully the Giants, the Raiders, and both those teams can win a game here, and we can jump them in the standings and end up with that first overall pick. Because I think for everybody, regardless of if you want a quarterback or not, that first overall pick will get us a better head coach if we're getting a new coach, get us potentially a franchise quarterback, or get us a ton of draft capital if we do want to roll with Shedeur and we want to trade out of that pick. It's just better for everyone. There's no point in winning games. And I think we're all in agreement there. Anyway, that's all I have for today's post-game show. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to have another podcast out to you guys this week. Maybe I will if any big news comes. If not, I'll be back on a regular schedule after the Steelers game this weekend. Hopefully you guys all have a great Christmas. Enjoy, your holidays. Enjoy some time with family. I will talk to you all very, very soon. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Bye-bye.